Today in the EU institutions call for investigation into Israeli military attack. Both European Parliament's President Roberta Metsola and top diplomat Josep Borrell called for a thorough investigation into the Israeli military attack that killed 7 humanitarian workers in Gaza this Tuesday. Borrell defined appalling IDF's military actions and urged for an immediate ceasefire. EU institutions' sentiments toward Israeli military forces seem to have taken a sharp turn, but countries in the Union are far from being united on the issue. Hello and welcome, I'm Giada Santana, and this is Today in the EU. We're here with Euractiv Spanish correspondent Fernando Heller to discuss the latest developments. Fernando, the killing of 7 humanitarian workers from World Citizen Kitchen has sparked international controversy. Can you break down what happened?
Last Tuesday, the 7 aid workers from the NGO World Central Kitchen left a food warehouse in Deir al-Bayat, a town in the Gaza Strip, where they had unloaded more than 100 tons of food to distribute to the population. And the NGO team of the Spanish chef José Andrés was moving in a convoy in a non-combat zone, and I say it again, in a non-combat zone. And the movements were coordinated with the Israel Defense Forces, the IDF. That is, they were not in an area of potential attack by Israel in the war against Hamas. However, at some point along the route, the NGO cars were hit by 3 Israeli missiles, which struck almost simultaneously, and all 7 aid workers were killed on the spot.
The founder of World Citizen Kitchen, José Andrés, called deliberate the military strike on the 3 vehicles of the international organization. What are the elements that support this thesis?
The IDF spokesman Daniel Hagari reacted on the spot hours before the incident took place, saying that this was the problem of identification of the target, which was under the attack of the missiles. So this explanation is not really a convincing one for Madrid. Spain's Prime Minister Sanchez is not really satisfied with this response. He's demanding that Israel conducts a very in-depth investigation of the facts. For the time being, he was also asked by Spanish journalists if Madrid was considering to take any kind of diplomatic actions against Israel. He was not really concrete in his reply. He insisted that he wants to wait a little bit for clarifications from Netanyahu. But in other words, in principle, Madrid right now, as we speak, is not ruling out to take any kind of diplomatic action if Israel does not clarify in detail the circumstances of the attack. So I wouldn't call yet a deliberate attack. I don't have the elements to call the attack a deliberate one. But for the time being, Madrid is waiting, and we'll see. It's probably they could escalate. This could escalate to a new diplomatic crisis, and this could be really serious.
But this is not the first confirmed attack on humanitarian relief groups by Israeli military forces. What's different this time?
Well, this is an extremely serious incident, according to our information, the latest information that we have. These are the first foreign aid workers to be killed in Gaza since 7th of October, the date of the Hamas terrorist attack on Israel civilians. And the most serious aspect of all this is that the aid workers were traveling in cars clearly identified with the NGO's logo, and that the Israeli army knew perfectly the route these vehicles were going to take, and they knew, they were aware of the NGO's humanitarian work. So there's no logical explanation of what happened that day. And let's not forget that this NGO started last March food and water supply corridor to the Gaza Strip to try to alleviate the famine of the local population. So they were just working and helping the population there.
Do you think that Pedro Sanchez has the potential to be the catalyzer for political change when it comes to Palestine's recognition?
Certainly, he's trying to play the advocate for the cause of the Palestinian people. Many times he repeated his position and Madrid's position, and that is that the Palestinian people is suffering too much, that Israel is going too far.
Las declaraciones o supuestas declaraciones que ha hecho el primer ministro Netanyahu sobre lo sucedido en Gaza.
During his visit to Qatar this week, Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez clarified that the explanations provided by the Israeli government were inadequate in relation to the recent attack. In a statement, Prime Minister Netanyahu has confirmed the beginning of an investigation, but NGO World Citizen Kitchen is asking for an independent probe into the military strike that killed its employees.
Madrid could take the lead, somehow a kind of lead, trying to unite the rest of the European Union and to form a kind of bloc, a joint bloc, and pressing Israel.
What's the Spanish PM strategy at the domestic level when it comes to sustaining Palestine?
Well, at the domestic level, you know that the coalition partner of Pedro Sanchez, the left-wing platform Sumar, led by the Minister of Labor, Yolanda Diaz, demanded that Spain recognize the Palestinian state as soon as possible. That was a precondition before signing any pact with the socialist leader, with Pedro Sanchez. So this is a demand that they kept, and they're making pressure on Sanchez to recognize the Palestinian state, and this is creating somehow an internal crisis within the executive, within the progressive executive in Spain. And the PM said, the Spanish PM said this week that this recognition could happen maybe in the coming summer.
Mm-hmm.
Minister Diaz recently visited Israel also and defends the idea that the entire left in Spain defends, and that is that Israel is committing a genocide in Gaza. So they are really pressing a lot the Prime Minister to move forward for this recognition. And to understand the background of the crisis, if you allow me, we should not forget that in November last year, Sanchez, who at that time was presiding over the European Council, visited Gaza, Tel Aviv, and the Rafah border crossing in Egypt, together with Alexander De Croo, the Belgian Prime Minister. And there he announced that Spain was ready and was prepared to recognize the Palestinian state. He said, and I'm quoting him, I have strong doubts that Israel is complying with international humanitarian law. This really sparked a serious diplomatic crisis with Israel, which accused him of siding with Hamas. And the crisis, I'm afraid, between Madrid and Tel Aviv remains open, as Israel is claiming and claimed last week that Spain's decision to recognize the Palestinian state is a direct way of rewarding terrorists. So, the crisis goes on.
Historically, EU countries have been divided on Palestine's recognition. Who is siding along Spain and who's supporting Benjamin Netanyahu?
For the time being, we can confirm that Ireland, Slovenia, and Malta have already pledged to follow Madrid's example, Spain's example. But indeed, as you mentioned, there's much division in the European Union. And of course, from the diplomatic point of view, the most difficult case is that of Germany because of its special historical relationship with Israel after the Holocaust. This makes it almost impossible for Berlin to recognize a Palestinian state. So far, we should remember that 8 countries have already recognized the Palestinian state, and that is Bulgaria, Cyprus, the Czech Republic, Hungary, Poland, Romania, Slovakia, Sweden, and the Czech Republic.
Within European institutions, there seemed to have been quite a transition from diplomatic silence to EU High Representative openly denouncing Israeli military strategy. Do you expect EU institutions to take a stronger stance on the issue going forward?
It is a tricky question. It is likely that if the number of victims continues to rise and the Israeli bombardment in Gaza is extended over time, as is happening with the war in Ukraine, it is possible that in addition, as you mentioned, to the harsh tone by Josep Borrell, other EU partners and Brussels may also put more pressure on Netanyahu.
EU's High Representative Josep Borrell has also been particularly vocal about the crackdown on humanitarian aid and the state of famine it has created.
Humanitarian assistance needs to get into Gaza, and the European Union is working as much as we can in order to make it possible. But this is a humanitarian crisis which is not a natural disaster. It's not a flood. It's not an earthquake. It's a man-made. And when we look for alternative ways of providing support by sea or by air, we have to remind that we have to do it because the natural way of providing support through roads is being closed, artificially closed. And starvation is being used as a war arm. And when we condemn this happening in Ukraine, we have to use the same words for what's happening in Gaza.
It's even possible that the United States, as you know, Washington is Israel's main ally, could also be harder, tougher in its relationship with Tel Aviv. Let's not forget that to date, almost 340,000 people have been killed in the conflict, and most of them are women and children.
Israel has suspended leave for all combat units amid heightened tension following the killing of Iranian generals in Damascus out of fears of retaliation. Do you believe the situation will escalate further?
I think that in this case, the United States and the European Union will try to avoid the extension of the conflict, like, let's say, a flame that is burning in the region. Indeed, as you know, Sanchez has visited the region last week, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Qatar, advocating for a peaceful solution. You know that Madrid is defending the position of a two-state solution for the conflict in Palestine. Anything should be done in order to avoid, let's say, the escalation of the conflict in the region, and specifically avoiding the escalation with Iran, which, you know, this could have devastating effects on spillover effect all over the region. The situation is moving and it's evolving minute by minute, second by second. So it's very difficult to predict.
Thank you, Fernando. This Sunday will mark 6 months of war, yet the conflict appears to be far from the escalation. Since October 7, more than 200 humanitarian relief workers have been killed, caught in the midst of military combat. Thank you. I'm Jada Santana, and this was Euractivist Today in the EU podcast. Visit Euractivist to stay on top of the latest news, sign up for our podcast newsletter, and if you haven't subscribed yet, you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever it is that you get your podcasts. This episode was produced by Miriam Sanz de Tejada, Nicoletta Yonta, Evi Chiori, and myself. See you tomorrow! As part of our commitment to accuracy, inclusion, and transparency, Euractiv is part of the Trust Project.